Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. So, in continuation of our No-Till Farm Tour series, today we are once again hanging out with no-till legends Jay and Polly Armour of Four Winds Farm in New York, hearing about the history of how they transitioned from a tillage farm started in 1988, I was 6, to a no-till farm started about 30 years ago in 1994, using compost as their primary mulching system. You are very distracting, kitty cat. Just an amazing amount of experience between these two. Real quick, this video was produced by my partner at no-tillgrowers.com, Jackson Rolette, who we were able to send up to New York and other places to meet people like Jay and Polly, thanks to you. Anyone who has purchased a copy of the Living Soil Handbook, or a hat, or other merch from no-tillgrowers.com, or anyone who has become a Patreon member at patreon.com/no-tillgrowers, that has helped us create these videos and share all this amazing information. So thank you. All right, with that, enough from me. Let's get to Jay and Polly Armour of Four Winds Farm.
We've been here about almost 35 years. We bought the farm in 1988, and we were both from out of this area. I was living in New Jersey. Jay is from Long Island. And we both fell in love with the Hudson Valley and moved up here and looked around for a farm we could afford, and we found this one.
Yeah, we also came from non-farming backgrounds. Our parents do not farm, and so when we were looking around, we weren't really sure what we were looking for, but we ended up with a really nice,
A real jewel.
yeah,
A real jewel
it
of
just
a
got a
place.
lot of good features on this property. And as friends of ours look around for property, they look at what we have and they kind of have an idea of the important things that make a property really nice. And one of the nice features of this farm is the freshwater springs that flow into ponds that give us water that we can use for irrigating the crops.
Yeah, we started out back in the 80s. We both had full-time jobs, and so that helped to ease the transition. Helped us to buy it and to pay for the starting up and so forth. We started out plowing and rototilling just like most farmers did at the time.
That's what we were told to do.
Yeah.
We'd go to workshops and people would say, yeah, plant a cover crop and plow that in and then rototill it and plant your crop there.
Yeah, and we started with a walk-behind rototiller, and then we got a tractor-mounted model, and boy, was that great, because we'd plow and rototill and then plant something, and the weeds would
beautiful
beautiful seed bed, so soft,
nothing growing in there,
fluffy, and we'd plant our stuff into it, and the weeds would come up, and it was just Jay and I, and we were both working, so we would work at it as we had time from our other jobs, and when the weeds got too bad, we'd just bring the rototiller back, and it was like a giant eraser. It just got rid of all our mistakes. We started over again, and we did that for about 5 years, and I knew I had my educational background is applied ecology, which is the closest you could get in the early 80s to organic farming in an academic setting. And I had a great professor of ecology, Dr. David Ehrenfeld, who really drilled into us the idea that you did not need to turn over your soil every year, and all the benefits that you could get of not doing that. For example, you get to keep the organic matter in the soil, you develop a long-term soil structure, the water moves through it better, it holds the water and the nutrients and so forth. And I knew in a theoretical sense that we could do that, but it was hard to figure out how to get it from a backyard garden scale where it's pretty easy, you can just use a spading fork or whatever. How do you scale it up to a farm scale? And then
we got invited to be a part of a think tank that was in New Paltz, a group of people who were concerned about the what was going on in the agricultural world. Basically, farms were not making a profit. The farmers were selling the properties. Developers were coming in and putting up houses, and so they just saw farm after farm disappearing, and they were concerned about this. None of the people in the committee were farmers or knew anything about farming.
Very little anyway.
Yeah, very little. There was a gardener there, and who knew a lot about gardening and wrote about gardening and so forth. But a friend of ours invited us to join because they felt that we would give them some insight. There was one evening where one of the people in the group said, "I would really like to see us turn this educational farm into a demonstration no-till farm." And I looked at him and I said, "No-till?" I said, "You need to till. I mean, that's how you control the weeds, is by tilling." And he said, "No, you're making more work for yourself by tilling. You're generating more
Yep.
weeds. And, you know, this is just not making any sense to me." And I said, "Well, you know, if you're not going to till, then how do you control the weeds?" And he said, "With compost." And my reaction to that was, well, you're going to need an awful lot of compost. Well, another person that was at that meeting is part of a family that owns a
Up on the
big
ridge.
hotel up on the ridge. It's this monstrous structure. It looks
Yeah.
like a fairy tale castle.
They were looking for a way to manage their food waste because this giant hotel was generating, I think it was 17 big
Garbage cans.
garbage cans of food waste every day from their kitchen. And so this fellow was trying to get them to compost. He was part of the family that owned and operated it. So he had started developing this gourmet compost that they were making from food waste and waste from the gardens and stable waste because they had horses and other animals there. And but he had produced all this great compost, but hadn't yet
Figured out what to do with it.
convinced the gardening staff that they could use it. So they had literally mountains of compost.
And the staff wasn't interested in making that happen. So they were just dumping it in the woods. Because I had to get rid of it because I had to move the second pad
So
onto the third. You know.
We basically said, dump it our way.
Yeah.
And
So-
we'll use it and we'll show you how it can be used. So we suddenly had all the compost we needed.
And you see some of the beds, the dark, rich compost. It just,
Yeah.
we called it gourmet compost. It was just spectacular, a spectacular product. And it was, you know, there for the taking.
Yeah. So the other issue we ran into was how to convert. At that point, our market garden was about 1.5 acres. Okay, how do you convert that to permanent beds at that scale? We plowed and rototilled just as you would if you were a conventional farmer. And then I went along with a shovel and just kind of shoveled the earth from the pathways onto the beds themselves, and then we spread the compost using a Gardenway cart. And it was slow and arduous, but it worked. And we had a lot of weeds the first year because it was the same, we had rototilled just as a normal year. The thing to remember is most of the weed seeds that germinate are in the top 2 inches of soil. So if you're rototilling or plowing each year, you're constantly bringing up new weed seeds. This is what my professor drilled into me. And
Picture.
once you stop rototilling, you stop that process, and eventually most of the weed seeds that are going to germinate in that top layer have done so. So your weed pressure is kind of bad the first year, but it gets better after that. And putting the compost down on top helps to suppress that. So it acts as a mulch. So that's what we did the first year. And then the second year, by then we'd learned from another person in this group how to use an implement that we already had, which was an adjustable back blade for our tractor, like a scraper blade, to put it behind the tractor, canted and tilted, and drove along, and it scooped up the dirt in the tire tracks and plopped it back onto the bed, or what would become the bed. That radically changed how we could do all this. And when we first started farming here, as I said, we were only working the front field. And I swore, this was all, what you see behind us was a hayfield. I swore that we would never expand back here. We weren't good enough farmers to do that. You know, it would kill us. There would be so much work and we'd never be able to keep on top of it. But once we figured out the raised bed thing and we got them, the permanent beds with the compost on top, it made farming so much easier that we expanded into this field and we built the barn. It's our multi-purpose structure. We developed a CSA. We expanded our CSA. We went to a 11-month CSA. We started growing seedlings in the greenhouse. We expanded the seedlings to a big seedling sale every spring. We moved away from the CSA into farmers markets. Our farmers markets took off. We now employ people. It's not just Jay and I. We both left our jobs, our outside jobs. We stopped having to do that.
And farming full time.
Farming full time, and now the last few years we've had a manager who runs most of the God, I guess it's on 10 years now, isn't it? Mm-hmm. A manager who runs most of the day-to-day operations. For a number of years we let other people take over the CSA because we didn't really need it anymore, so we had a sort of journey person farming operation here. Having these permanent beds has been the key to all of this. Absolutely. If we were still plowing and rototilling, we probably would have given up.
Yeah.
You know, we would have just made hay and left it at that. That source of compost from Mohonk Mountain House was a key ingredient to our ability to expand. After a while, Mohonk figured out how to use their own compost. And
Well, part of the deal I had with Giroux was he wanted me to take pictures of us using the compost and, you know, how well it worked and so forth, and to go up and talk to the person in charge of the formal gardens and show them these pictures and convince them that this is a good product that they should use. And I did a really good job.
yeah, so they started using it themselves.
I called up one spring. I said, Giroux, I'd like to come up and get some compost. He says, well, we're using it all ourselves now. We don't have any extra. It's like that year we ended up buying. Well, our neighbor does a lot of earth moving and so forth. He has a 21-yard tractor-trailer dump truck. And so we hired him to go over to McEnroe, which is a farm in northeastern Dutchess County that makes a lot of compost. And we got a tractor-trailer load of compost there.
Yeah.
And did that several times and then realized that
this was not sustainable. It was not as good as what we were getting.
And I've got to figure out a way of making it myself.
Hey, you all, just jumping in real quick to say that if you want to know more about their static aerated compost system, check out the video we did last week. We'll link that here on YouTube in the show notes, or you can also just always search our channel for that thumbnail, this one. All right, back to Jay and Polly. You're the worst.
I think we're growing on 4 acres of land. I've never measured it.
It's difficult to say what our use is because the beds are permanent. We can fairly easily rotate crops. We know exactly what was planted, exactly where, exactly when, and we rotate our crop families around. And the compost usage that we put down really is determined by the condition of the bed, what was in it before, and what's going in it this year. Some beds would get compost 2 years in a row, 3 years in a row. Others might go a couple of years without a compost application. So it's hard to say we put X number of yards everywhere because we don't. Okay, so it's on a bed by bed basis that we put it on, and when we wander around, you can take a look at it.
Yeah, a bed like carrots, where you're pulling them out of the ground, and you're sort of mixing the topsoil with the compost. The following year is going to need more compost because you've
disrupted
agitated
it. Yep.
the surface. Something like kale, where we cut our plants right at the ground level, leave the roots in the ground, and they eventually decompose there. So we're not disrupting that soil at all. Oftentimes that doesn't need compost the next year. Those are two examples. Tomatoes we tend to do, since we're doing a single row down the middle and we mulch them heavily with straw, we don't do the whole bed with compost, we'll just do a strip down the middle. So each crop that we're putting in, we're sort of assessing the condition of the bed, what was there the year before, what's going in there this year, and that will determine how much we put down. Also, we try and lay our compost down in the fall. Last year that was not possible, I think, weather-wise.
Yeah, it was difficult.
I forget what it was about the weather, but it was difficult to do. So we were doing most of the laying down the compost in the spring. And we've used up all of the compost that I made last year.
We're covered though, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're pretty much all done.
So here it is,
Spreading compost.
early June, and our field work, basically our field prep is done, which, you know, I know this is a no-till compost, a no-till podcast, so our audience is somewhat aware of the benefits of no-till, but one of them is that you can get out on the field first thing. You know, you don't have to wait for the ground to dry out to prep it. In these pictures, I think, is a picture of me spreading compost on one of our fields, and just a few
That's this one here.
spots.
With water.
Yeah, there's, you know, here is where we've been spreading compost, and this is standing water here, and it's just a, you know, topographically, it's just a little ways down the hill, just a few feet lower, and that's where, when we do, you know, a workshop or a presentation at a farm conference or something, that's where everybody in the audience goes like this, you know.
But also back in those days, we were spreading from a garden weight cart.
Yeah.
Now we use a tractor with a bucket, and we back that tractor backwards, and two people unload the bucket.
But even so, we were able to get right onto that field. There was no tillage that needed to happen, which would not have been, you know, no matter what equipment you have, you'd be a fool to try to rototill or do any heavy field work, any tillage work in that kind of soil condition. So we haven't had significant rain here in many weeks now, and I've been working on a particular project, which is the Canada Thistle Eradication Project, which is a whole nother subject that we should touch upon. But what I'm finding as I dig down 8 or 10 inches to find the Canada thistle roots is that the soil is still moist a few inches down. And where I'm doing it in an area where we've put in tomatoes every other bed, and so the beds on one side have the tomatoes and they have the manure compost on top as the mulch, and the tomato plants are in there, and the other beds are bare. And I've been digging thistles out of both beds carefully with the tomatoes. But where the compost is, it is quite moist down there, even though we have had virtually no rain now for several weeks. And the other beds are moist, but not as moist. And I know that's because of our high organic matter. Now we are growing, this hillside here is Hoosic gravelly silt loam. So it's a droughty soil. So we work to keep the organic matter up as high as we can, but it is working. That soil is beautiful. It has beautiful tilth under it. I stick the spading fork in and it comes up and, you know, crumbles nicely, but doesn't turn to dust or anything like that. And it's wonderful to work at. And I feel like I'm like I have to restrain myself from calling the staff over and say, look at this soil. This is flocculation. See the tendency of the soil to form small aggregates. That's the organic matter holding the mineral particles together. This is what we do. This is why. And it's hard for me to not do that.
I really love those two. Anyway, like this video if you like this video. If you're not subscribed to the channel, make sure to hit the subscribe button. And if you are subscribed, you're awesome. You can always support more videos like this as well as the videos I make by going to no-tillgrowers.com and picking up a copy of the Living Soil Handbook or a hat, or just go to patreon.com/no-tillgrowers and sign up. This video series is literally a product of your support. Last, you can hit that super thanks button. That helps too. Super thanks for watching. We'll see you later. Bye.
Before we developed the thistle issue, our big problem was quackgrass or quackgrass coming in from the sides, which is similar to Johnson grass. And even after we got it out of the beds, it would still creep in from the edges. And a friend of ours who is a permaculturalist taught us to use comfrey at the edges of the beds.